Shadow of Mordor, the game that created and killed the system. Shadow of Mordor is a game made by Monolith Studios. It was a new entry into the Lord of the Rings series, but isn't canon to the lore. The system that they made was called the Nemesis system, which now has a patent on it, so no other studios can use it till 2036. Sadly, the studio that took advantage of the system was shut down earlier this year, so we may not see it anytime in the near future. Shadow of Mordor was a really interesting game for the times, mixing Assassin's Creed and Batman elements together for the gameplay and taking inspiration for the story from Lord of the Rings. Honestly, this mix works really well for the game, and here's why. The game starts with you sparring with your son on top of the Black Gates. You play as a character named Talion. Talion is a ranger stationed there after the killing of a nobleman to protect your wife Lurith. The game gives you a basic tutorial on how to fight and does this really cool transition between the past and present, showing you fighting your son, then switching to orcs to test out how it really feels in combat, which I really like. After you're done sparring for a bit, they show you some of the other things that you can do, like ground execution and stuff like that, and it all feels really nice. I love the executions that they added to this. It makes it feel so much cooler as like you're fighting through them, so it's not like basic combat where they just fall over. You can actually like behead them, cut off their arms, stuff like that. It's really cool. But after you do a decent amount of that, you end up heading on to the next part where you get to learn how to do the stealth. If you played any of the Assassin's Creed games, then you would know exactly how this feels. It feels really good and natural. When you actually start going through, it shows you the past again, where you are sneaking up on your wife Lorith, and then it turns into the orc spot, so that you can actually learn how it feels actually when you're playing through the game. So I really like how they did this, and it's really weird, but it's really enjoyable to go through, and it gives you both the transition of like the story of like what's actually happened beforehand, like how Lorith wants to leave the Black Gates, but your character decides that you shouldn't, which he ends up regretting later on. After you fight through a couple more orcs and stealth kill them, you lead to the next part where you get knocked out and all three of you get executed by the Black Hand. This part's really cool. It shows you a whole bunch of different orcs and like the main enemies that you're going to be fighting through the game. And it's really entertaining to see, and it gets you really excited to go through the story because it gives you a really proper revenge story right off the bat. So you end up watching your son get killed and then your wife, and then sadly you end up getting killed, and then he says, "Come back to me, Elf Lord." And this ends up playing a role later on. You end up coming back to life and you end up meeting this elf, and you guys are banished from death and now pretty much the same person. I honestly found this really interesting, so it plays a major role later on, but this is Celebrimbor, and you end up getting to learn his story as you play through, which I think is really fun to do. But right after this, boom, you're right into the world. It's immediate. There's not much time to like build up for this. I think you played maybe 20 minutes and then you're open to the whole world and you can go do whatever you want right off the bat. It's really up to you what you want to do, but there is a lot of side quests and main missions to go through, and it really comes down to what you find enjoyable. If you're into collectathons, this game has a lot of them, just to get you ready for that. The only thing that's interesting about the collectibles is the artifacts, in my personal opinion, and that's just because you can look around on them and then see a memory on them, which tells you pretty much a little bit of the story. But let's get on to the main story before we talk about this more of the side quests. The main story ends up having you jump off the tower right after you spawn, and you end up shooting a couple enemies with a bow, which leads you into following what Celebrimbor wants you to do, and this is find 3 key things to go and do, and it doesn't really matter which order you decide to do them, it's really up to you. The first one I did is go kill a slaver because that's what the objective wanted you to do, and this is where it unlocks the first ever system that sadly will probably not come back until 2036, and that's the Nemesis system. When you get into this, you pretty much grab an intel from this random enemy that you find throughout the map, and once you get this, it unlocks the area and like this description of a character. What you find out throughout playing this game is every single time that you kill one of these characters, they are replaced by another, and they are completely unique to themselves each and every time. It's really entertaining. They all have unique names, they all have unique backgrounds, they all talk differently, and they all wear different types of armor, so everything doesn't feel the same, and it's honestly insane. Once you get into the system, you'll notice how like fleshed out it is and where all the time and effort went into, and honestly, it's pretty great. But before we get more into the Nemesis system, we have to get farther into the game to even talk about it. After killing the Slaver, we end up seeing a familiar face if you watch the Lord of the Rings movies or The Hobbit, and that is Gollum. Now you can either branch off and go and do this, or you can help this rebel that you know, and his name is Hirdon. You end up finding him at the camp, so it's really up to you which one you want to do, or you can go and do this other one, which I decided to do, which is go help an orc named Ratbag. And this is the one that truly plays into the Nemesis system even more. Ratbag is a very interesting orc, and by far probably one of my favorites.
Now, what would you know that all these other dead orcs didn't?
Go ahead, you bastard! Do it! I'll die, and you'll know nothing!
Maybe I'll grant your request. End your miserable life.
No. I was just a...
When you get to Ratbag, this teaches you more about the Nemesis system and how the captains work. Even though it showed it off a little bit at the beginning, it actually shows you some of the unique things that captains can do, and that is doing feasts, going off to do duels, go hunting, etc. There's a whole bunch of different things that they can actually go and do around the map to gain power, which makes them stronger as a captain, which is really cool. And it adds a lot more flavor to the game. Instead of just finding them around the map, now you can actually find them at the missions and go attack them there. But as you go through this one, all you're doing is finding a captain to kill for Ratbag so that he can get promoted, and that's pretty fun to do. If you're trying to get an easy match, then you'll just have to follow what his weaknesses are, and that's one thing I really like is the strengths and weaknesses of the captains. All of them have their own unique little issues with them, whether it be something positive or negative, which makes it a lot more entertaining for multiple different playthroughs, so you can actually try to critique and find certain things that you're looking for in a captain. After wrapping up killing the captain, I ended up heading off and finding Gollum. And Gollum shows you the artifacts around the map that you need to collect, and all of these give you a little bit of the past history of Celebrimbor and how he actually died, which is really fun if you really want to learn more about the story of like Lord of the Rings. It is nothing like it actually is in the books or the movies, whatever it may be, just because it is its own non-canon thing, but it's still really entertaining to go through and see how they kind of twist up the plot to make it unique in its own right. While you go through this, it is just a pretty basic mission. You kind of just follow footprints until you find a cave, and then you end up finding the artifact, fight a couple Caragors, and head out and talk to Gollum. The highlight of this, honestly, is just Gollum, and it's really cool to see him actually in game form. You can tell that the voice is a little bit off, but it still sounds really good and almost close enough to the actual voice actor to be pretty good. Once you do this, it goes into a couple more branching paths again, and I just followed Ratbag's story until the end, and this is pretty much where you get to go and fight another captain. It's pretty basic and self-explanatory. Just take him out for Ratbag and then get him promoted again, because the dude doesn't know how not to get captured. So after you do that, then you can get him up to a Warchief. So after you end up fighting that one captain, the next objective is to fight the Warchief, and then this is where it leads into you having to fight every single Warchief, not at the same time, but at least you have to learn how it actually works. So when you go and fight a Warchief, instead of just finding them randomly around the map or doing a quest and just fighting them at their like little quest they have their own little mission that you actually have to go and do and pretty much get them to come out of hiding to come in and attack you. And it's pretty fun to do. It gets a little bit tedious and repetitive after you do it for the third time because most of them kind of feel the same or very self-explanatory and nothing too interesting, at least in my opinion. But after you end up wiping out the last Warchief, Ratbag finally gets his promotion and becomes the next Warchief. The one thing that makes this really entertaining is as you go through the progression for the captain's upgrades, the armor and stuff that the person has will upgrade as well. Ratbag looks really badass at the end of it, even though he is kind of just a snake and not really that tough of a person, but at least they made him look cool to fit the part. But yeah, it's pretty interesting to actually go around and fight all the war chiefs. At this point, that's pretty much what your main mission is, and after you do that, you finally get to head back to Hirdon, or you can go do it before this, and this is where you just pretty much lead the rebels revolution, where you have to go and help find Hiran's wife and save her from encampment. This is where you get to learn how to use poison, and it's kind of entertaining to do so. But before we get into that, let's talk about the upgrades a little bit. Once you actually get around this part, you're probably gonna have a decent amount of upgrade points, and honestly, the level up tree is pretty good in this game. A lot of the stuff feels unique or different, and really useful. Not as useful as they are in Shadow of War once you get to that one, but they are still very important in this game. Not as exciting as Shadow of War, like I said, but at least most of them have some type of use. Like you can be able to throw daggers, you can burst on the ground to knock any enemies back, you can drain health from the enemies into your own health tree. It's really cool stuff that actually adds to the game. It makes it a little bit more entertaining. It even has like things where you can do executions by pressing Y and B and stuff like that to make the battles feel a lot easier and get through. The one thing that you'll notice around this time, as long as you've been doing a lot of level ups and stuff like that, the game is kinda easy. You can fight honestly like 4 to 5 captains with no issue at all, and it kinda just feels like that throughout the whole game. Even during main missions and main bosses and stuff, it doesn't really switch up at all, and it all kinda feels a little too easy. Sadly, there is no leveling like thing where you can choose a higher tier for like challenge and stuff. It's kind of all the same challenge, so as long as you're having a breeze at the beginning, you're probably going to have a breeze at the end. But back onto the main story. We end up heading back and going with Hiran to take out the statue and completely destroy it, and it's just a statue of Sauron. This mission's not all too interesting, but it's kind of fun to go through. But after you end up doing that, you end up having the last mission in the area, and that's where you get to fight one of the Sauron's captains that you met at the beginning. It's the one with the mace, and honestly, it's not all too bad. Sadly, this is where Ratbag gets flinged the fuck away, and then you and him start your 1v1 fight, and it's decent. It's by far the best main story mission when it comes to like boss fights, and you'll see why later on, because the other ones are very disappointing, but at least it was still somewhat fun. All you have to do is just keep killing enemies around you, get your execution up, and then just beat the shit out of them. But it only takes like 2 to 3 minutes to actually get done with this. But after you're done, it unlocks the next location, and you meet another girl, and this one leads you to the Queen, and this is where you get to Nirn. And honestly, this place is pretty cool as well. The girl that you meet is Lothariel, and she leads another rebel group in Nirn, and this is where you get to meet Queen Marlin. And honestly, this part is really nice. I really love the different like atmosphere that this place had, and it shows how it really played a role into what Shadow of War ends up being, because it looks completely different than what it is at the Black Gate. Instead of like it all being dead and kind of groggy, and you know what people usually hate is like the brown crappy looking aesthetic. This one's more like luscious and has like trees, and everything feels a little bit more bright and cheery, and I really like the look of this location. It's really entertaining to go through and see like all the different spots, and it kind of just plays into whatever they want to make it look like, because you never really get to see these parts in the movies, so it's actually a little entertaining to see like what creative liberties they took to actually make these locations. But when you finally get to the Queen, you end up seeing that she's pretty much sick, but she has like this power that she wants to give you, so you have to follow through her quest and end up finding an artifact. Once you actually get to find the artifact, this gives you the power to start branding. And branding is by far the best part of this game, and honestly the only replayability like factor in this game, at least in my opinion. The branding is a major role in the Nemesis system, and is the last thing that you actually get to do. Pretty much what you can do now is go up to any orc or captain or even warchief and brand them and turn them into your own army. And this is so entertaining because there's so much stuff you get to do with it. Not only can you send these troops out to go level up by like doing beast hunts, stuff like that, go and duel with different orcs that you want taken down, even do ambushings, or do even executions. If you want to send them off to do that as well, they'll do whatever they need to help you. You can even turn them into a bodyguard for the warchiefs, which makes it really entertaining. Because once you actually get to do stuff like that, you can have them betray the warchief and end up killing them with you, and it's just so much variety to this. And when you end up recruiting a Warchief, you can end up using them to do something unique, which is you can now send them off to do riots. And these are their own little special thing that they can do personally. And it just has a whole bunch of armies just meet up and then just beat the hell out of each other. So if you want a Warchief to kill a Warchief, you can send them off to do that. So then you don't have to do the quest anymore to like fight the Warchief. Like you don't have to do the setups. All you have to do is just send off your troop to riot with them, and it immediately starts it, and you get to decide if you want to keep that Warchief or kill them off. Honestly, I find it really entertaining being able to do this, and plus it makes it so you have so much more replayability. You get to decide which characters you think are worthwhile to keep around, and which ones that you should kill and just pretty much throw away, which really adds more flavor to the game. And that's why it's so sad that this system is completely gone, or is going to be gone for a good while, and it really sucks because Monolith had a great system going. I just wish they never would have put a patent on it. But while you're doing a quest for Queen Marwyn, you end up meeting Torvin in a cave. He ends up saving you from a whole bunch of ghouls by pushing a barrel of explosives into the cave and blowing it the hell up. After you meet Torvin, he ends up teaching you about the hunt. And this part's kind of cool. It's all just side stuff, but it's main mission stuff that you actually have to do, but it feels kind of more like filler stuff. But it's really interesting to go through because Torvin is actually an interesting character. He is a dwarf that is pretty much hunting for revenge for his brother. So you have to go and kill a Graug with him. But throughout the time, you end up unlocking new abilities and stuff, so it's actually really worthwhile to get through. And that is that you can now tame Caragors, which are the warg types that are in this area, which is really cool. Aside from that, you can also learn how to tame Graugs, and it's honestly kind of insane. It's really entertaining actually jumping on top of these Graugs and just wiping out enemies in front of you, and having little to no challenge put against you. It's really entertaining, at least in my opinion. But once you go through his missions, they're not all too bad. I'm not going to go all too much into them just because they are kind of samey. All they really are is just you watching him and pretty much following to go and kill animals for the hunt until you get to the final Graug. And we'll talk about that one at least. This Graug fight is not all too bad, but that's not really what I want to talk about. It's the last artifact that you end up grabbing, and that's the hammer that Celebrimbor used to forge the ring. And this is where it gets kind of interesting. You actually get to learn how he ended up dying to Sauron. And might I just add on to this, the cutscenes at these parts look amazing. They're really entertaining to watch, and it, like I said, it's really cool to see like this story be retold, but in like a different light of like showing Celebrimbor as this big badass that was actually defying Sauron with his own army. It is really entertaining to go through and pretty much kind of hype him up and make an interesting backstory for him. But aside from that, you end up getting through it and killing the legendary Graug with Torvin, and that kind of ends off his quest. But back onto the rebels, you end up just following her around for a while Celebrimbor kind of defies it and doesn't want to go and do this. He thinks that the people should fight for themselves, and you shouldn't be really doing this because it's a waste of your time. But you end up doing a decent amount of quests, and then you pretty much come to the same conclusion as you did with Hirgon, and that's that they should probably leave, and that you're more trouble for them than anything. So you end up doing a couple more quests and end up heading to a fishing village to go and help her fight against this one group because you have intel that there's people there, and she ends up getting captured. So you have to brand a whole bunch of enemies, and they all just pretty much go into a huge fight, and it's kind of entertaining to go through, but it leads into the last mission of the game. And honestly, this game is pretty damn short. It is like 10 to 12 hours if you're really pushing it, and that's if you're doing like side content. But if you're doing just the main story, I wouldn't even say it's 10. It might be like 8 hours at most, which is kind of disappointing. But if you end up doing all like the side content, it could push up to 15 to 20 hours. But after you end up getting to her and doing this little fight, you end up seeing the tower, which is the other big bad guy that stopped the dude from killing you with a mace. And you end up not fighting him, but into the last mission you do, you end up going onto a boat after you take enough Warchiefs that you brand and head to this one island. The one thing that's interesting about this island when you actually get to that, you end up fighting the main bad Nemesis that you had throughout the game Funny enough, though, mine was just a dude named Douche the Crafty. I killed him 3 times in a row, and I guess that makes him my quote-unquote nemesis. So when I got there, I just re-killed him again for the 4th time, and he just went through it. That was another thing I kind of forgot to throw in. It's kind of interesting that if you kill someone, it doesn't mean that they're going to be dead. They might actually come back to life, which is another cool thing about the Nemesis system. But after I ended up killing him for the 4th time and headed in, it actually is kind of cool when you get into this location. This guy plays mind tricks onto you so you can actually see your wife and stuff and kind of relive your past. And it's kind of cool in that way. But it's such a terrible mission aside from that. It's really cool aesthetically, but when you actually go and fight him, all you have to do is just stealth drain him like 5 times and it kills him. You end up stabbing him and that's it. That's the whole mission. It's really disappointing, but not as disappointing as the last mission. So pretty much after you do that, you end up heading back and you find out Queen Marwyn's place and all that has been attacked, and then you find a crown. You end up picking it up and you find out that Celebrimbor is actually just pretty much brought you back to life. You guys weren't banished from death together because of some curse. He actually decided you were the one that he chose. So it kind of makes it interesting in that light because it just shows that he decided to just take this dude that could have died with his family and been happy, just like ending it there, and brought him back to life to pretty much live through this torment with him, which ends up making a divide. I wish this would have happened a lot sooner in the story because it can't really play that much of a role, but it does in Shadow of War at least. But after you end up doing that, you head back to the Black Gates and for your last battle with the Black Hand of Sauron. Before you do, you end up fighting these 6 dudes. They're all different captains that you've never met before, but they're kind of cool to go through. They're all just like different variants that you fight throughout the game, and you just fight them with your Warchiefs again, and they're a breeze to get through. But after you get done with that, you end up heading up onto the Black Gates, which is a fitting way to end the game. But when you actually get to fighting him, it's a quick time event. A quick time event for your last mission and your last boss is by far the most disappointing thing you can actually do with a game. You end up just pressing random buttons that they want you to press, like usually it's just A to dodge, and then X, and then Y to deflect, and then X just to kill him, and that was it. That's how it ends. It's so fucking stupid. It's by far one of the worst like final missions I've ever played in a game, just because it's so boring. It feels like they built up this character so much just to do so little with him. And it's the same thing with the other 2, to be honest, like the tower and the dude with the mace. You only see them like once, and then after that you see them at their death times, which is kind of insane. The tower's the only one that ever got seen again. He was seen for 3 times throughout the game. And I kind of wish they would have did like these transitions where you could see how they were thinking and just like more monologue between them to understand what is actually going on and why they brought them back. But pushing it all into the end just makes it a little bit more cluttered. But at least the ending idea was kind of cool. After you end up killing him and heading out, you end up deciding that you are not ready to die and that you want to try to stop Sauron, and Celebrimbor decides that he agrees, and then that leads into the sequel. Honestly, I think the game is pretty amazing. If you never played the DLC, that one's pretty entertaining to play as well, but I think Shadow of War did almost everything better, but there is a lot of caveats with Shadow of War as well, which I'll probably be making a video on next. But if you guys enjoyed the content, make sure you leave a like and a sub. And if you have suggestions for anything else to check out, make sure to leave them down in the comments down below. But I'll see y'all next time. See ya.